Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Húrin.
I'm Dan.
I'm Greg.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we continued chapter 20. The enraged Eldar furiously pursued Morgoth's forces to the very gates of Angband. Gwyndor and the elves of Nargothrond burst into Angband but became trapped there, and only Gwyndor escaped. Fingon was beaten back to the plain of Anfauglith, but Turgon and Maedhros eventually arrived, and hope was rekindled. Morgoth unleashed his full strength on them. Then Ulfang carried out his treacherous plan and attacked Maedhros from the rear. His forces were scattered, and the sons of Fëanor retreated. Azaghal, lord of Belagast, and the dwarves held back Glaurung heroically. Let me reread that. Azaghal, lord of Belagast, and the dwarves held back Glaurung heroically. Azaghal was defeated, but badly wounded the dragon, and the beasts of Angband retreated. Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, and a great army fought against Fingod and Turgon in the west. Fingon faced Gothmog alone and was slain. Huor, Húrin, and the house of Hador fought off the onslaught of Morgoth to give time for Turgon to retreat back to Gondolin. Húrin alone remained, and he was taken alive to Angband. Today we conclude chapter 20, beginning on page 195 of the second edition. Great was the triumph of Morgoth, and his design was accomplished in a manner after his own heart. For men took the lives of men, and betrayed the Eldar, and fear and hatred were aroused among those that should have been united against him. From that day the hearts of the elves were estranged from men, save only those of the three houses of the Edain. The realm of Fingon was no more, and the sons of Fëanor wandered as leaves before the wind. Their arms were scattered, and their league broken, and they took to a wild and woodland life beneath the feet of Ered Lindon, mingling with the green elves of Sirion, bereft of their power and glory of old. In Brethil, some few of the Haladin yet dwelt in the protection of their woods, and Handir, son of Haldir, was their lord. But to Hithlum came back never one of Fingon's host, nor any of the men of Hador's house, nor any tidings of the battle and the fate of their lords. But Morgoth sent thither the Easterlings that had served him, denying them the rich lands of Beleriand which they coveted, and he shut them in Hithlum, and forbade them to leave it. Such was the reward he gave them for their treachery to Maedhros, to plunder and harass the old and the women and the children of Hador's people. The remnant of the Eldar of Hithlum were taken to the mines of the north, and labored there as thralls, save some that eluded him and escaped into the wilds and the mountains. The orcs and the wolves went freely through all the north, and came ever further southward into Beleriand, even as far as Nantathren, the land of willows, and the borders of Sirion, and none were safe in field or wild. Doriath indeed remained, and the halls of Nargothrond were hidden, but Morgoth gave small heed to them, either because he knew little of them, or because their hour was not yet come in the deep purposes of his malice. Many now fled to the havens, and took refuge behind Círdan's walls, and the mariners passed up and down the coast, and harried the enemy with swift landings. But in the next year, ere the winter was come, Morgoth sent great strength over Hithlum and Neverest, and they came down the rivers of Brithon and Nenning, and ravaged all the Falas, and besieged the walls of Brithombar and Eglarest. Smiths and miners and masters of fire they brought with them, and they set up great engines, and valiantly though they were resisted, they broke the walls at last. Then the havens were laid in ruin, and the tower of Barad Nimras cast down, and the most part of Círdan's people were slain or enslaved. But some went aboard ship and escaped by sea, and among them was Easterling, Gil-Galad, the son of Fingon, whom his father had sent to the havens after the Degor Bragalach. This remnant sailed with Círdan south to the Isle of Balar, and they made a refuge for all that could come thither, for they kept a foothold also at the mouths of Sirion, and there many light and swift ships lay hid in the creeks and waters, where the reeds were dense as a forest. And when Turgon heard of this, he sent again his messengers to Sirion's mouths, and besought the aid of Círdan the shipwright. At the bidding of Turgon, Círdan built 7 swift ships, and they sailed out into the west. But no tidings of them ever came back to Balar, save of one, and the last. The mariners of that ship toiled long in the sea, and returning at last in despair, they foundered in a great storm within sight of the coasts of Middle-earth. But one of them was saved by Ulmo from the wrath of Ose, and the waves bore him up and cast him ashore in Nevrast. His name was Voronwe, and he was one of those that Turgon sent forth as messengers from Gondolin. Now the thought of Morgoth dwelt ever upon Turgon, for Turgon had escaped him. Of all his foes, that one whom he most desired to take or to destroy. And that thought troubled him, and marred his victory. For Turgon of the mighty house of Fingolfin was now by right king of all the Noldor. And Morgoth feared and hated the house of Fingolfin, because they had the friendship of Ulmo his foe, and because of the wounds that Fingolfin gave him with his sword. And most of all his kin, Morgoth feared Turgon, for of old in Valinor his eye had lighted upon him, and whenever he drew near a shadow had fallen on his spirit, foreboding that in some time that yet lay hidden, from Turgon ruin should come to him. Therefore Húrin was brought before Morgoth, for Morgoth knew that he had the friendship of the king of Gondolin. But Húrin defied him and mocked him. Then Morgoth cursed Húrin and Morwen and their offspring, and set a doom upon them of darkness and sorrow. And taking Húrin from prison, he set him in a chair of stone upon a high place of Thangorodrim. There he was bound by the power of Morgoth. And Morgoth, standing beside him, cursed him again, and he said, "Sit now there, and look out upon the lands where evil and despair shall come upon those whom thou loves. Thou hast dared to mock me, and to question the power of Melkor, master of the fates of Arda. Therefore with my eyes thou shalt see, and with my ears thou shalt hear, and never shalt thou move from this place until all is fulfilled unto its bitter end." And even so it came to pass, but it is not said that Húrin asked ever of Morgoth either mercy or death, for himself or for any of his kin. By the command of Morgoth, the orcs with great labor gathered all the bodies of those who had fallen in the great battle, and all their harness and weapons, and piled them in a great mound in the midst of Anfauglith, and it was like a hill that could be seen from afar. Hadh-en-Ndengin, the elves named it, the hill of slain, and Hadh-en-Ndengin, the hill of tears. But grass came there and grew again long and green upon that hill, alone in all the desert that Morgoth made. And no creature of Morgoth trod thereafter upon the earth, beneath which the swords of the Eldar and the Edain crumbled into rust. So in summary, the Eldar come to mistrust men outside the 3 houses of the Edain. The sons of Fëanor are broken, and now dwell in the foothills of arid Lindon. The Easterling men are sent to Hithlum, where they pillage the remaining people of Hador, who are eventually forced into labor in the north. Morgoth sends forces to Brithombar and Eglarest near the sea, and slays the greater part of Círdan's people. Círdan and Gil-Galad flee to the mouths of Sirion, and Turgon asks Círdan to make 7 ships to send into the west. Only one of these return. Morgoth is angered for allowing Turgon to escape. Morgoth tries in vain to convince Húrin to betray Turgon, but Húrin refuses. Morgoth binds him to a peak of Thangorodrim so that he can see the destruction that will come. A great heap of the slain is formed in Anfauglith, Hadh-en-Ndengin, the hill of the slain. So the thing that struck me is the fact that the orcs are basically just vacationing. They're just like, in all of the north, they're just like taking up camp and just roaming freely. Most of this story, they've been in the subterranean Ungband, but now they're out in the open. That was a shock to me. Greg left.
Greg's left. He's gone. He was not.
He's
shocked.
like I don't want to hear their reactions. I just am here for the book.
Do you have vocals, Greg?
I'm alive.
Belgreg. Hey, first of all, where's Belgreg from?
Oh, it's coming up.
Oh, okay. Spoiler.
Yeah.
So your name is Belgreg.
Yeah.
And Dan's name is Nerneath
Greg.
Enoedan, unnumbered T's.
Unnumbered tears.
Mm-hmm.
Which we had that. We had that nomenclature.
Yeah, that word was in here
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Hill
And we
of
learned
Tears.
Nirnaeth is the word for tears. So
I know, but you
Nirnaeth.
can't. Nerneath can't turn into Dan's name as easily.
No.
Near Daneth, maybe.
Near Daneth. Yeah, maybe. It's a bit of a stretch. It's not as good as Cameron.
Cameron
Yeah.
Turumbar. Yeah, so Greg, what do you think about the orcs just roaming freely? It was a surprise to me because up to this point they've been underground.
Underground, have they? Or
Well, they've been in the
far
fortress.
away, right? They've been off in Ungband and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary times.
Is Morgoth? Is this his big moment where he thinks he can take control of Middle Earth? He's been, because Angband was like a fortress of secrecy and malice and plotting,
Right.
and now it's just all out in the open. Seems like.
Well, yeah, this is one of the lines that stood out to me. This is right from the beginning of the reading, 195. It says, "Great was the triumph of Morgoth, and his design was accomplished in a manner after his own heart. For
Right.
men took the lives of men and betrayed the Eldar, and fear and hatred were aroused among those who should have been united against him." So it just reminds me, in any relationship, and I think this is Morgoth knows this. It's so much easier to break things than to build things. It's so much easier to destroy the trust that is had between these people.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot. We've seen it a little bit where these heroic acts, like when the ships were burned in Losgar, and but then Fingon saves Maedhros. It's like that kind of heroic act was needed to rebuild the trust. But it's so easy to, sow distrust and break it. And I think for Morgoth, it's more of a lasting victory, because even if they do at some point unite again against him, there's always the threat, there's always going to be the fear that someone is unfaithful and will betray them. That mistrust between them just lingers.
That line is really profound. The fear and hatred were aroused among those that should have been united against him. I mean, that's something that we experience in this world. And obviously Tolkien's from this world, so he's putting that into this world. But at the same time, it's in this world. It's kind of by design that happens. Obviously, Tolkien was Catholic, so he believes in the influence of the devil upon people, which is where he would get that from. But I wonder. It's a very profound line, I think. I didn't notice it as Cameron was reading it, but Greg, when you just read it, it's like really, really stuck out.
Yeah, I'm a little too monotone when I read, I think.
Mm.
But when Greg said it, it had this like sparkle to it.
No. It took me a while to get through it. Greg just pointed it out. So
yeah. Well, let me point something out. So when I beautifully read that the thought of Morgoth dwelt ever upon Turgon, for Turgon had escaped him, and of all his foes, Turgon was the one who Morgoth desired to take or destroy. Why do you think that is? Why is Turgon the one that Morgoth most desired to destroy? I'm curious about that.
Well, didn't it say it in that paragraph? It said even back in Valinor they didn't like each other.
Greg, why don't you just read the paragraph?
Yeah, maybe Greg, if you read the paragraph, I think it'll make sense. So is it just they have this past, like they're mean girls?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it says
you looked at me weird.
I wrote the words.
You came to my club and looked at me weird.
Old grudge. No, it's kind of what it is, right? He says whenever he drew near, a shadow had fallen on his spirit. Like something about Turgon passing by and Morgoth got insecure or something in a shadow.
Mm.
He's like an insecure teenager, and Turgon's like this big hulking elf.
Jock.
He's like
elf jock.
Elf jock, yeah. And throwing his football around and Morgoth just hated him. He just let that hatred grow in him.
As elves do. We have Thangorodrim again. I don't know if we've heard of Thangorodrim since Maedhros was a prisoner, right?
I don't think so. I think we heard about it like every chapter since then.
Well, Greg, how about you read every chapter? Because we don't remember things when we read them.
No,
you know
I mean,
okay. In fairness, I read every chapter 3 times because of the behind the scenes stuff. So,
wow.
Or like when I hear it read, it's like the 3rd time I've gone through it. So
you're the resident expert, is what
I guess.
That's right.
Which is that makes it really unfortunate when I say things wrong still, because this will now be.
Yeah, that's true. You're the only one with pressure.
Maybe you can say like Melkor, thou hast dared to mock me and question the power of Greg, master of the fates of before the fellowship.
Yeah, you're right. We hear about Thangorodrim a lot, but it's not. It's not really the setting, is it?
Did you do a word count? Right.
No, I looked at the index in the back. So we're on 197. It was also 192, 190, 182, 178.
Yeah.
But I don't remember it because it wasn't like.
You're right. This is the first time they've really, like, someone has been standing up there.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. This is the first time in a while someone's been standing.
Not only standing up there, like
he's sitting actually.
Yeah. I guess he's
stuck up there. Yeah, he's stuck up there
in a chair of stone.
Well, okay, for me, what stood out is it's just capturing how terrible this ruin is. So Círdan is like way off by the sea, and he's been pretty far removed. Like normally, Morgoth's forces don't reach him. But his people were just wiped out. So that just kind of goes to show how decisive Morgoth's victory is, that him and Gil-Galad had to flee by ship. And I like this little point here that when those messengers are sent out into the west, they all, pretty much none of them return except for the one who is saved by Ulmo from the wrath of Ose, which we've already heard. I mean, that goes way back to when we talked about Ose being he used to be. At one point, he sided with Morgoth, and he still has this violent side to him. So it just makes you think: what other elements of the story have been the influence of the Valar and the Maiar, but we just didn't even notice because it wasn't mentioned.
Right. We only get some of the legends passed down. That's a good point. But it does seem to be that Ulmo is the one that is always nearby at their aid. But then we get, Beren and Luthien, at the Hall of Mandos and, appeal to Manwë. I'm trying to think if there's been other instances of the Valar. I think besides that, they're kind of MIA.
Yeah, no, we've had some other interactions.
Trying to remember.
I mean, there's some of the Valia as well that. Yeah, I can't remember.
So what is happening with Húrin when he's on Thangorodrim exactly? He's like stuck there and has to witness all the evil or something?
Morgoth gives him the power to see what he sees and hear what he hears, so that he can hear all the cries kind of like, and the torture.
As a form of torture.
Yeah. I think it might have been more explained in the unwritten tales or the unfinished tales, whatever they're called. When I read about Turin Turambar.
There is a Children of Húrin. Is that what you read?
Oh, that might have been it. Yeah. Because that has more detail in it.
It must, yeah, I think it does.
I remember this being a way he was torturing him by having him see, like, the worst torture is for you to see the suffering inflicted on your family. And he has him hear everything. Hear and see everything. Like every one of his, brutal. Family that's
I do think destroyed. Though it would be worse to see your own evil. Like that would be the worst torture, to see like your own, like the fruit of your own evil deeds.
Oh, if you add guilt and shame on top of that.
Yeah.
It just compounds it.
This is a heavy reading. Remember when this was fun? Everyone's just dying.
Yeah. I'm glad this one was short though, because I mean, hopefully we're going to get onto brighter futures, right?
Yeah, Greg? Let's just get on to when Greg reads.
Yeah.
Let's just get to that point. So if you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Follow us everywhere at Before the Fellowship. Join the discussion on Discord. And send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next week as we read the greatest story you've never heard, Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Any last insights, Greg? Any interesting things that me and Dan don't know?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean,
all right.
That's it.
Okay. All right.